Welcome to Mythosium, the channel where we take complex science and technology and break them down into clear, simple stories that anyone can understand. So today, let's talk about one of the biggest misconceptions people have about airplanes: the doors. Most people think airplane doors are locked during flight, maybe with special keys or security systems that prevent anyone from opening them. But here's the surprising truth. Most plane doors aren't locked at all. There are no keys, no passcodes, no electronic locks. If someone wanted to pull the lever, they technically could. And yet, despite more than 40 million flights every single year, no one has ever successfully opened a plane door while flying. So why not? You might assume it's because people have common sense, that our instinct for self-preservation keeps us from doing something so reckless. But that's not the real reason. The real answer lies in physics, in how planes work, and where they fly. Let's start with a simple question. How high do planes actually fly? Some people imagine 10,000 kilometers, which, to be fair, would put you somewhere in outer space. The real number is much lower, though still incredible, around 35 to 40,000 feet, or roughly 10 to 12 kilometers above the ground. So why that height? Is it to avoid mountains, storms, or other planes? Partly, yes. But the main reason is much simpler. It's about money. At higher altitudes, the air becomes thinner. There are fewer air molecules pushing against the aircraft. At around 33,000 feet, air density is just 1/3 of what it is at sea level. That means the plane experiences less drag, can travel faster, and uses far less fuel. Pilots say that during climb, an aircraft might burn 80 kilograms of fuel every minute. Once it reaches cruising altitude, that number drops to about 40 kilograms per minute. And during descent, it falls to just 10. That difference translates into huge fuel savings for airlines and faster travel times for passengers. But efficiency isn't only about thin air. It's also about temperature. Jet engines perform better in cold air because it allows for more efficient combustion. Up there, the temperature can be minus 50 degrees Celsius, far colder than the 15 degrees you might feel on the ground. The cold air helps the engines burn fuel more completely and generate more thrust with less effort. So flying high gives you a smoother ride, faster speed, and lower fuel costs. It's the sweet spot for performance and efficiency. But there's one big problem with being that high up. You can't breathe. If you were suddenly teleported to the top of Mount Everest, which is still lower than a plane's cruising altitude, you'd pass out within 3 minutes. That's because air pressure drops dramatically as you go up. At 10 kilometers, the pressure is only about 1/4 of what it is at sea level. Even though oxygen still makes up 21% of the air, there's not enough pressure to push those molecules into your bloodstream. Humans need an oxygen pressure of about 16 kilopascals to function normally. But at that height, it's closer to 5. That's why airplane cabins are pressurized. Air is continuously pumped into the cabin from the engines, keeping the inside environment similar to what you'd experience at about 2,400 meters above sea level. It's not perfect, but it's enough to breathe comfortably. However, this pressurization required engineers to completely redesign airplane doors. Early aircraft flew much lower and didn't need pressurization. Their doors opened outward, and since the air pressure was the same inside and out, sealing them wasn't a problem. But once airplanes started flying higher, those old doors wouldn't do. Engineers created what's called a plug-type door, one that's wider on the inside than on the outside. When the cabin pressurizes, the higher pressure inside pushes the door firmly into its frame, creating a tight, airtight seal. That seal is the reason airplane doors don't need locks. The pressure difference between the inside and the outside is enormous, so strong that no human could ever overcome it. At cruising altitude, it would take a force equivalent to lifting 9,000 kilograms just to pull the door inward. Even modern passenger doors that seem to open outward actually start by moving slightly inward before rotating out. And that tiny inward motion is physically impossible when the cabin is pressurized. So even if someone tried to open the door mid-flight, nothing would happen. The air itself is stronger than any lock. That's also why when you're on a plane and someone flushes the toilet, you might notice a slight dip in cabin pressure. The system isn't perfectly airtight. Air is constantly flowing in and out to maintain balance, but the overall seal is strong enough to keep everyone safe. Still, you might have heard stories about people opening airplane doors mid-flight. And yes, in rare situations, it has happened, but only when the plane was already close to landing. For example, in May 2012-30, a passenger on an Airbus managed to open an emergency exit while the plane was descending toward the runway. At that low altitude, the pressure difference was minimal, so it was physically possible. It was terrifying, but everyone survived. At higher altitudes, though, that would never happen. But maintaining pressure isn't risk-free. Every time a plane climbs and descends, its fuselage expands and contracts slightly. Over tens of thousands of flights, that repeated stress can cause fatigue and tiny cracks. In 1988, Aloha Airlines Flight 243 suffered a catastrophic decompression when a section of the fuselage tore away mid-flight. The plane had flown almost 90,000 cycles, far beyond what it was designed for. Miraculously, the pilots landed safely, though one person lost their life. The investigation revealed that constant pressure cycles had weakened the metal until it failed. That's why airplanes aren't pressurized all the way to sea-level pressure. Instead, they're kept at about 75 to 80% of normal atmospheric pressure. That's enough for comfort and safety, but low enough to reduce the strain on the fuselage and extend its life. So if air pressure keeps you safe in the sky, what about the rule we all hear before takeoff, the one about turning on airplane mode? The origins of that rule go back to the 1960s, when the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration discovered that portable FM radios could interfere with navigation systems. To be safe, they banned nearly all personal electronics during flights. Later, the rule extended to cell phones, but for a completely different reason. The Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, worried that phones in the air could confuse the cellular network on the ground. See, on Earth, your phone connects to 1 or 2 towers at a time. But from a plane, you could see 20 or more towers, and at 800 kilometers per h-hour, that connection would change constantly. The FCC feared this could overwhelm the system. So, in 1991, they banned phone use in the air. But there's a catch. An airplane is basically a giant metal shell, a Faraday cage that blocks most signals. Only a little bit of radio energy escapes through the windows, and even then, it travels sideways through the air rather than down toward the ground. Meanwhile, cell towers are aimed downward, toward people walking on the surface. In other words, your phone barely connects at all. Even the FCC later admitted the ban might not be necessary. And to this day, there's never been a single recorded air accident caused by a mobile phone. The only real risk is minor radio interference, that buzzing sound pilots sometimes hear in their headsets when a phone is active. Would one phone cause a problem? Probably not. 200 phones, all pinging at once? Maybe. So airlines take the cautious route. Instead of testing the limits, they simply ask everyone to switch to airplane mode. It's not really about safety. It's about minimizing risk and avoiding chaos during takeoff. But times are changing. The European Union no longer requires passengers to use airplane mode and is encouraging airlines to offer onboard 5G soon. You might be able to call, text, or stream mid-flight. No airplane mode needed. Now, speaking of mid-flight, let's talk about one of the great mysteries of air travel. Why airplane food tastes so bad. We've all experienced it. Bland meals that feel like they've lost their flavor. But the truth is, it's not entirely the airline's fault. It's your body that's changed. Inside the cabin, the air is extremely dry, sometimes only 5% humidity, far drier than the Sahara Desert, which averages 25%. This dryness dehydrates your nose and dulls your sense of smell, which is crucial for tasting food. On top of that, the lower cabin pressure reduces your sensitivity to salt and sugar, making everything taste flat. But interestingly, there's one flavor that actually becomes stronger at altitude: umami, the savory taste found in foods like tomatoes, soy sauce, and mushrooms. That might explain why so many passengers order tomato juice on planes. In fact, a survey of over 1,000 flyers found that about a quarter of them drink tomato juice during flights, and almost none of them drink it on the ground. Some scientists believe the constant background noise in the cabin might even stimulate a nerve near your eardrum that enhances your sense of umami. So next time you fly and tomato juice suddenly tastes delicious, now you know why. All of these details, from pressurization to sound to flavor, show just how complicated flying really is. And yet, air travel today is incredibly safe. Every incident, no matter how small, is analyzed in detail by experts. Every failure teaches engineers something new. That's why flying keeps getting safer year after year. Even concerns like climate change are being studied carefully. In 2023, they were 23 billion. They were 2,500 billion jet streams, which could lead to more clear air turbulence. But the media often exaggerates or oversimplifies findings like these, which is why it's so important to look at all sides of the story. Understanding the science helps us separate fact from fear. And that's what we do here on Mythosium. We take complicated topics, from airplane doors to cosmic mysteries, and make them clear, logical, and fascinating. Because the more we understand the world around us, the less mysterious it becomes. So the next time you're sitting by the window, watching the clouds drift below, remember this. The door beside you isn't locked by a key. It's locked by the sky itself. By the very air that keeps you alive. You're flying in one of humanity's most advanced machines, built through decades of learning, testing, and refining. And every single flight you take is a quiet triumph of physics and engineering. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want more science explained in plain, simple language, don't forget to subscribe to Mythosium. New videos come out every day, and we'd love to have you on board for the next one.